Welcome to the podcast. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Clem, and this is Turns Out We're Gay. I'm nervous.
Why? No one's listening.
I feel like there's 4,000 people listening, and you know
God.
what? It's probably going to be our mums.
That's even more awkward. So this is our first episode, and when we were talking about doing the podcast, we thought it would be important to have an episode of introduction to why we're doing this.
Absolutely. You were actually nailing that.
You're not.
I'm not a professional.
No, I love that.
I'm here for the shits and gigs. You're here for the structure.
Perfect. So that's what this episode's going to be about. Clem's really not doing a great job at explaining that, but that's okay. She will come in later with some really funny stuff.
That's actually rude.
And that's actually accurate.
We thought this first episode would be really important to break down basically what the podcast is going to be and then give you a little bit of insight into us individually.
Good job.
Thank you. I can do it if I want. I just didn't want to.
Perfect. So we thought about doing the podcast a few months ago. Why?
Okay, that is an awful way to ask that question. You just came at me saying that I am not doing this well and then said that. That's the worst interviewing technique I've ever come across.
Okay. I hope you can cut all this.
I'm going to have to, and it's going to be a lot of work, so we've got to actually get serious. You've got to get serious. I am working with a novice.
You are a novice. The podcast is...
I can't believe you said I was bad at this.
I wish we recorded what we said yesterday, because what we said yesterday was really good.
Unfortunately, we didn't. And it took me about 3 hours to set this up.
I actually can't remember what we said. This is going really badly.
We thought we were going to nail this, and we are not.
Oh, God. How do people do this?
Okay. We're a couple. We met on TikTok.
Yeah.
We both do live streams and interact with our audience, and they seem to love our banter and our communication on there. So we figured, why not put it into a more accessible piece of content where they can access it at any time. The name that we chose, Turns Out We're Gay, is because we both came out later in life. Probably a bit of a curveball to a lot of people in our lives. And we both have pretty unique views on why we think there's space for a podcast like this. What's your view?
You basically nailed it.
This is where you go. I think I started really badly, but now I've come back strong, and you're like that. I've jumped back to where you were at the start. I just spoke for about 3 minutes, and then you're like, perfect.
That's actually perfect.
No, tell everyone why you're doing it. Why did you want to do the podcast?
Well, I think firstly, when I was coming out later in life, I wish that there was a place to listen like a podcast and understand what I was going through, because it was confusing. It was really confusing. So I think what we've come up with for this podcast is lots of different topics that we both experienced, and it could be very useful to other people coming out, but also family and friends is what we were talking about yesterday. It was family and friends, or people who are friends of other people that are coming out later that could come here and listen to two people who have gone through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's your main driving factor.
Yeah, that's my main driving factor. And I think this podcast is something that we already talk about on TikTok with our audience. You know, when we have like little questionnaires and things, the types of questions that we're bringing up are the types of questions that our audience are already listening to. So,
yeah, and I think they're the kind of questions that our family and friends would want to ask, but maybe don't feel comfortable to do so. And the other reason that I wanted to do it was visibility. For someone like me, being a tomboy growing up, there just wasn't anyone in the media. The only person really was Ellen DeGeneres. I wasn't attracted to that type of person. I wasn't wanting to be that type of person. So I didn't think that I fit in the category of gay or lesbian or queer or whatever, because I thought you had to look a very specific way in order to be that.
Yeah.
Or be attracted to that specific stereotype or look. The more I saw people that represented themselves pretty similar to me, and being a bit more fluid with masculine clothes and a masculine style, but not necessarily a mask, as they say, the better I felt about doing that myself. So I think one of my big things is being more visible and giving someone like me growing up or whatever, that person to sort of go, okay, hang on, that's where I fit in. That's the kind of look I want to be. So yeah, for me, it's visibility, I think.
Which is also really interesting because when I was coming out, I thought being a femme was that I needed to be attracted to a mask, which is actually not so much the case. But also visibility as a femme coming out, you know, the struggles that we have around people thinking that we're just straight and that's all we are. And that kind of ties into the Ellen thing of that's what we were raised with, is knowing.
Yeah, I think there was just such a select few in the mainstream media, and there's so many more now, but there's still so much more room for it. And I think they still struggle to get out of the stereotypes all the time. So I just think, what's the harm in more visibility and normalise it and show them that we're living our lives out and proud.
We're very gay.
We are very gay.
Turns out we're gay. And what do you think everyone should expect?
I think there's going to be a couple of episodes that the parents want to probably tune out of. We're going to keep it classy to a degree. But no, we're going to be really real, I think. And we're also going to put it to anyone that does listen, if they have any questions at any point in time, to ask us, and we'll try and slip that into the episodes or whatnot. And we're going to be making extra content as well. So even if we don't answer things on the podcast, we're happy to answer things off the podcast. But I think a lot of it is going to be our perspectives, our experiences, and potentially hopefully getting some guests on to talk about theirs, and maybe from perspectives that we can't cover ourselves, because I don't think we can talk to every category of the queer community.
No.
But yeah, I think it's just going to be our stories, our experiences, our advice, and some funny stuff along the way.
Lots of funny stuff. I think what to expect as well is just being completely real. Get ready for some swearing. And
actually, that's a very good point, and we said we were going to do this at the start of the episode, but I think it's okay. We haven't said anything too crude yet, but there's a bit of a warning that I think we are going to be really real and really honest, and you need to be aware of that when you tune in. There will be swearing when we deem necessary, which, to be fair, is probably a lot more than it should be.
And we're sorry to parents. To everyone else, we're not so sorry. But also just some, you know, interesting conversations that will come up that might be uncomfortable.
Well, and do you know what?
Questions.
That's reality.
Yeah.
The queer community have uncomfortable times. To be honest, we talk about some things that make people uncomfortable, but it doesn't actually make us uncomfortable.
No.
And I think that's the thing, is we want to bring some of these conversations to light and make them normal conversations to have.
Well, we've had many conversations that I think we've both sat back and thought, wow, if anyone else had this conversation with their partner, I don't know how that would end up.
Absolutely.
Pretty
Literally
much.
everything.
Yeah. Probably too much of everything.
Probably too much.
I think that is also something that I wanted to bring up in a later episode, is having an open conversation with your partner and what that looks like. And I think we are able to have conversations that with removing jealousy and those types of things. And that's what makes doing this podcast so easy with you, because we can just talk about anything.
Well, I think that's the thing. A lot of relationships, people let a lot of emotions get in between things. I think we both have pretty similar stories to an extent, very different a lot of the time, but both coming out later in life and struggling with that, but also now getting to the point that we're so happy with ourselves.
Yeah.
It kind of just makes you realise that there's no point in getting worried about a lot of these little things.
Yeah.
So we do have some really raw conversations about exes, about, you know, past experiences and things like that, and we're happy to talk about that together. We've literally covered, I think you know absolutely everything about my history.
I think so.
And that's been really good for me to process that as well.
Well, yeah, and I think we've had conversations even about recent relationships where I've said, have you had time to process that?
Yeah.
And that's been interesting.
Absolutely.
Hearing that from me.
Exactly. I think that's another thing, is we hold each other accountable. If there's emotions or something that we think we need to deal with, we tell the other person. But yeah, we've had some very raw conversations, and that's exactly what this will be. It'll be just us talking. A lot of rubbish most of the time. But
lots of rubbish, get used to it. But on that note, why don't we jump into a little bit about our stories, and let's start off with, when did you know that you were gay?
That one's funny because it's very different for both of us. I didn't know. I knew I was different. I knew that there was certain girls that I probably wanted to be their friend a bit too much or whatever. You know, I played rugby, so I was around a lot of queer girls. I was around a lot of same-sex relationships and things like that, and I have no issues with it all. I was best mates with some of them. It didn't really cross my mind. I was with a guy. I met him when I was 18 and I was with him till 28 almost. I miss that time of experimenting. I miss that time of trying different things out and whatnot, as people would say. So that was the norm for me. And like I said, growing up, I didn't see it anywhere. So for me, I didn't figure it out until I was really faced with an engagement, planning a wedding, talking about babies, and really having to reevaluate my thought on life, on where I wanted to be, what I wanted my future to look like, and address the things that I had been pushing down.
What was the turning point for you? What was the one moment that made you think, I might be attracted to women?
Do you know what's funny? I don't think there was really one point. There was a couple of different things. So I went to a gym and there was a couple of girls there that were queer and I became friends with them. And I think one of the biggest things for me was when we were hanging out in a little group of girls, no one treated them differently and they were so proudly living their true, authentic life. And I was amazed. Because in my mind, it was a taboo subject. I loved queer people. I had no issue with anything like that. But I always thought that other people would. And that's how I was not raised, because my parents didn't have any thoughts to it. But the way the mainstream media, portrayed it was that it was not a positive thing. So when I saw them going about their life and being so happy in those queer relationships or situationships or whatnot, it opened my eyes. And then another turning point, which was a bit of a random one, but I was watching the women's soccer and it was when Sam Kerr and Christy Mewis there was rumours about it. I don't think Christy Mewis is ever going to hear this, but
she might.
She was kind of my gay awakening, to be fair, because I hadn't really come across femmes as such, the stereotype of a femme. A queer girl that, presents feminine. And it opened my eyes. I started going down the path of who's dating who in the soccer world and whatnot, and realising that there are some gorgeous girls in my eyes because, everyone has a different thing that they're attracted to. But there was girls that I was genuinely attracted to that I was like, well, hang on a second, what's going on here? Because they don't look like what I thought lesbians look like.
Yeah.
And I am attracted to them. And I had to unpack that. I was with my fiancé at the time and I had to go through that whole process, which we'll get into. But it's different for you because you have known.
I have known. I've known since before I can even remember. I knew at a very, very young age, and I think I was certain probably as young as even 10, like 9, 10, maybe even earlier. And I just wasn't particularly attracted to, at 10, you're not really attracted to anyone, but, I just was more interested in being around girls in general and just not noticing anything else. But I knew then that something was different with me. And as I went into my teen years, this is an embarrassing story, but that's what this podcast is about.
I'm here for it. I'm excited.
Let's hear it. But there was when it was like the Dolly magazine time, everyone had a Dolly magazine.
I didn't because I was a tomboy.
That's really awkward. Everyone
I didn't know I was gay.
Everyone but you had a Dolly magazine. And there was this one Dolly magazine where they must have had like a lesbian representation, and it was two girls holding hands or whatever, and I was like, oh, that's interesting to me. So I kept on to that. Like I would look at that all the time. And then there was another like magazine thing, and there was this really pretty girl, and I was just like, she's stunning. Like I'm obsessed with her. And she was kind of my gay awakening. I don't even know who she is. Sorry, whoever it is, but
do you know what? If you gave us more information, we put it out to the queer community, I guarantee you we would find that person. They're like private investigators. She
kind of looks like Anna Sherry, if you know who that is. But that was my moment of like, it wasn't a happy moment for me. It was actually shame. It went to extreme internal shame, and I knew that I was different, but I ended up living 20 plus years of my life in straight relationships knowing that I was different. And I had the odd, kiss of a girl in high school and...
Odd? I feel like we've spoken about it and you've had more than the odd one.
A couple of kisses with a girl that I can remember. But I always said it's just a drunken thing. I never really wanted to admit that it was anything more than that. There was actually a girl I went to high school with, and I won't name names she probably doesn't want to be on our podcast, but she was outwardly gay in like year 11, 12, and I was just so fascinated by it and just seeing her live her life, and she's now married with a beautiful little boy, and it's just so interesting. So I remember conversations I had with her, and I wished in that moment that I could be like her. It wasn't until my first separation that I actually wanted to explore dating women, just dating. Unfortunately, I wound up in another relationship, and it took me another probably 3 or 4 years before I actually came out. And at the time, I came out to my ex-husband. We had, gotten back together. We didn't get remarried, but he was my partner at the time. And I came out to him, and that's a whole other story, but he was very supportive when I came out to him at the time. But yeah, I didn't actually come out till I was about 20, 26, 27.
Yeah. Well, that's actually perfect because that leads us into how did you come out? So I guess with yours, there's actually kind of a 2-part series. How did you come out? As you said, you came out to your partner first. How did you come out to him? And then how did you come out to the wider audience?
This is a bit of a hairy question, and you know it is, but that's why we're here. When we got back together, we weren't maybe connecting the way that we thought we would, and so we went on a trip to Byron Bay, and a lot of that lack of connection was me coming out of a really horrible relationship in between us separating, and I think I just needed to find myself, and I didn't get that chance. So when we were in Byron, we were driving around, and I think he noticed me checking out a girl walking across the road, and he was like, what was that? Like, he was just a bit confused. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, what do you mean? He's like, you were just checking out that girl. I was like, no, I wasn't. I was like, yes, you were. And then he started to notice it more and more, and then it kind of pushed for him to ask and say, is there something there? And I was like, yeah, there is, actually. And I wanted to explore that, and he was very willing and happy for me to do that. But I was still quite ashamed of it. I was very clear that I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't want it to be plastered anywhere. I wanted to just explore it on my own. I didn't want my family and friends to know. And that ended up causing a lot of internal damage for a long time, which wasn't his fault. It was me not being brave enough to come out and be me. How it came out to the world, I didn't come out to the world.
You didn't get the chance to.
I didn't get the chance to. And it doesn't matter who and how and when, and we won't go into that, but it was kind of put out for me to lots of people. The first time was just in like a local town, and then it was on social media, and then it was at a very public event where lots of people found out that I was gay, and that was horrible.
Well, I can't imagine that. Obviously, I was not in that same situation and I was given the opportunity to do it myself. But how did that make you feel? Because that, for me, I just can't even comprehend.
I was heartbroken. I was completely heartbroken, especially with how my family found out and my friends, my closest friends found out through social media. And I didn't get the chance to... Firstly, I think at the time I wasn't even really there yet to be ready to come out. Like, I was out, but I wasn't ready
for everyone to know.
And I was still in a relationship. And so they had no idea. And that's a whole other story that I don't know if we'll get into that today, polyamory and what that was for me. But it was put on social media, and that was really hard. I had questions coming to me going, what is going on? Why aren't you talking to me about this? But all very, very supportive. My family and friends were very supportive. When it was in a more public setting at an event that I was a part of, I was very visible at this event, and I had multiple strangers coming up to me and saying, I heard X, Y, Z, and it's because you're gay or whatever. I don't know how much I'll go into that because it might hurt somebody else, but it was hurtful. And I remember going into this back room and just bursting into tears, and I called a friend. I was just distraught because it was my coming out story.
Yeah.
And it didn't get to happen. And albeit everyone was very supportive and lovely, but it didn't matter to me in that moment.
Yeah,
it didn't matter that everyone was supportive. It mattered that that was my story, and that's how people found out. And it was not great. It was not great. And then after that, obviously, it kind of pushed me to just really be who I wanted to be, but it was hard. Yeah.
And so your family and the people that you cared about took it well?
They did. They were a little confused.
I bet.
They were a little confused because my coming out came out in a polyamory way, not in a Sarah's a lesbian way. Yep. So that was already confusing in itself. I've got nothing against polyamory at all, but...
Well, you experienced it.
I experienced it.
For quite some time.
Exactly, I did. And it taught me a lot, but I looking back, I wish I had have gone a different way and explored a different way. But they were very supportive and very loving, and I'm very lucky to have particularly a mum who probably loves the fact that I'm gay and probably is a little bit gay herself. But anyway,
she's a little bit rainbow.
I think she is. She's definitely an ally. Very supportive, very much loves you. And we love Shez, but she's been nothing but supportive, and I think even through the weird dynamics, she's been very supportive of that. So it's an interesting story, and definitely one that we can unpack. It's a big story.
We will unpack it, don't you worry.
What about you? Because your coming out was a bit different to mine.
Yeah, it definitely was a bit different. It was a lot more private and a lot slower, I think. So I had those thoughts and things, and as I said, I was with my fiancé at the time, and I had to try and understand that I had probably the worst month of my life. Not even a month, but a couple of weeks. I had the worst couple of weeks of my life when it suddenly hit me that this was what I was going through and what I had been experiencing for this such a long time. And I think you hear all these people say, you know, once I realised, I thought back and saw all these other moments and you know, when I was playing rugby or whatnot, and friendships and people that I thought, well, okay, my fascination with them was not what I thought it was. It was more. And things like that start to sort of all click into place, and it just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. And yeah, it was probably the worst couple of weeks, month of my life, trying to process that. I tried so hard to ignore it and to not address it and to change. Just be like, just choose to not do that. Just choose to not be that. And as everyone in the queer community knows, it's just not a choice. Just simply isn't. So I originally came out to my partner. Well, I came out to my sister first, one of my sisters, to help process it, because I was so depressed and anxious about everything. And, you know, we're going to talk about mental health and stuff at times throughout here, but having always struggled with anxiety, that was something that this was a massive trigger for me. And I just couldn't breathe. I couldn't cope. So I spoke to one of my sisters, and she sort of was my sounding board more than anything. At the end of the day, I think she knew as well as I did that it was something that I needed to figure out and decide on how I wanted to do it, but it was just a good support to have there in that moment. But I made the decision that my first step after that was definitely to talk to my partner. So I sat him down, and God, I've never been more nervous in my life, because at this point in time I actually wasn't understanding it either myself. So I said, I'm attracted to women. I'm still so attracted to you. I still love you. I still want to be with you, but I need to be myself as well, and I need to be open with that and have confidence in that part of my life. I genuinely believe that I was bisexual. It didn't mean that anything had to change and that I could continue my future with him. That's obviously not how it went.
Obviously not, because I'm here, but...
Yes. He took it really well.
Yeah.
I couldn't speak more highly of how he sort of supported me throughout that. We obviously had a couple of bumps along the road of trying to understand it, and, you know, things that came up and trusting each other and whatnot. I can't fault the way he sort of handled all of that. He was amazing. But as I started to learn more about the community, the life that I was living, myself, I just started to realise more and more that it just simply wasn't what I thought it was. The more I embraced it, the more me I felt, which was something that I'd never really felt, and I hadn't felt for the couple of years before that, that's for sure. So anyway, it just sort of slowly progressed that it wasn't going to work out with me and my partner at the time. It also came into the, you know, things like marriage and babies and whatnot came into the situation where I think because I was going through such a huge life change, there was no way I could have comprehended anything like that at that point in time as well.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things for me was it wasn't a choice. And that's something that I really struggle with, and a lot of the people in our lives really struggled with. We were together for 9 years, so our circles were one. Neither of us had tons of friends. We both had close friends, and we both were very intertwined in one another's friendships and things like that. So I lost a lot of friends in that moment, rightfully so. You know, wanted to stand by my ex and things like that, and I can understand that. I can imagine that it came as a big shock to everyone. So I didn't tell anyone other than that. I said to him, you can tell whoever you want to tell in the sense of wanting to talk to people or get support, but I wasn't going to tell anyone at this point in time. I slowly started to tell people throughout that process. I told a couple of my best mates who took it amazingly. Couldn't have been happier for me to be myself and whatnot. Again, I said, I think I'm bi, I'm attracted to women as well, blah, blah, blah. I want to, be myself kind of thing. And I reassured everyone because everyone knew my ex, everyone loved him. I reassured them, this doesn't have to change anything. I think we're still going to be together, blah, blah, blah. I came out to one of my other sisters, which if anyone knows the Lockharts, we are all very awkward individuals. And it was just a very awkward encounter. So I then made the decision that I wasn't going to face-to-face come out to anyone else after that. Bless her cotton socks.
Oh, we love her.
Yeah, so after that, I then ended up sending a message to my family, a group chat, as, current times as could possibly be.
I love the Lockhart group chats, by the way.
The Lockhart group chats go off. And I got some lovely messages back and whatnot. I didn't actually directly message my brother and my dad, the men in my family. And I just said to Mum, you can do that. She did that and she said, Dad's going to need to speak to you later. I was like, absolutely not. I'm not answering that phone call. There's not a chance in hell. Not that I thought anyone was going to take it badly, but the way she wrote it, as you know, Mum writes messages in a very unique way. It sounded like he was going to kill me.
Oh, God.
And he was lovely. I don't think he even called me. He texted me just being like, I love you, and whoever you love is none of my business, to be honest. Like, it doesn't change a thing. So he was very good. But yes, my partner and I split up. And then a couple of weeks later, I pretty much said to my family, well, I don't actually think I'm bi, to be honest. At that point, I'd never even been with a girl. So I was like, well, how could I be a lesbian without having to actually tried it? Which I now know that you can be whatever sexuality you are without having had sex at all. But at that point in time, I had this thing where I was like, well, I haven't even been with a girl, so there's no way I could possibly say that I'm a lesbian. I must be bi kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I then tried that a couple of times.
A couple, yeah.
And very quickly realised that that was probably my calling.
I don't disagree.
Anyway. But no, yeah, so a couple of weeks after we split up, I ended up saying to my family, I don't think that there's any sort of... And there was definitely a bit of the stages of grief of not only the relationship, but me coming out of questions being like, do you not think maybe that you could still be bi and you're just maybe going through this phase of just exploring that and whatnot? And I just I think a lot of the time I just went through my process myself and told people what they needed to know along the way, and I didn't really keep them up to date with this and that and whatnot. But yeah.
I think it's hard for people who aren't gay or are in the closet to even comprehend what you're going through. It's hard to understand because their human nature is to be attracted to the opposite sex.
Absolutely.
So for them, it's more of an internal thing. It goes against everything in them to understand what that is for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's where those questions come from. It's just a natural instinct of like not being able to even visualize it as a thing.
And I think that that's where it's very important to give room to that in those situations. I personally think you have to give room to people to have those poorly worded questions or reactions that weren't expected and things like that. I think to an extent. I mean, there's also, at the end of the day, what we all want is it to be normalised and to not be a difference.
Yeah.
To not have to come out and things like that. But at the end of the day, you do have to. And with the way society is, it is against the norm. So I think you do need to give a bit of room. Within reason.
Well, I actually think you do that really well. I've seen you do that. And I think you're understanding of that.
I think I'm probably maybe a little bit too understanding sometimes. But I think there's also times where I think you get a little bit protective. And I think, no, I do think we do need to give a bit of room. as I say, to an extent. There's always definitely time and a line where you pull people up and go, do you know what? You're actually not being acceptable at this point in time.
Yeah. I think my protection comes from you being able to be 100% who you are, because coming out as a lesbian is not just, or any lesbian, queer, whatever, isn't just about you being with a woman. It's actually about you exploring who you are all over again. And so, you know, we've had a few conversations around, even on social media, around like you've got to dress a certain way or be a certain way to get a different reaction on different things. And I've pulled you up on that and said, I want you to be exactly who you are and keep exploring that. And that's probably where my protection comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. When someone says something that doesn't align with me being who I am authentically, then you definitely get a little bit
I definitely
upset.
jump in. Yeah, I definitely jump
Which
in.
I love. And it's been good. It's like, as I said, and I said this at the start, we hold each other accountable, and that's something that you've really helped me with, because there's been times as someone that tries to create content and engage with audiences streaming and whatnot, that I have said, you know, I think I would get much more traction if I presented femme. And you've said that's not you. And it simply isn't. And I played that character for a long time.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't identify as masc. I don't think I'm a boy. I don't want to be a boy. I don't want to act like a boy. I think I'm a very gentle soul and I have a very feminine nature about me. I like to be cared for.
You do.
And things like that. And I think people see a certain thing, and we're going to go into this later on in the podcast in other episodes, but people see people a certain way, and I think that's the thing that people didn't realise was me relearning myself was more than just I want to kiss girls.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And I've gone through the same thing as a femme, where I've maybe not been so thick-skinned and actually let a lot of walls down that I had up when I was straight, because I felt like I was constantly having to be someone that I wasn't. So I think it comes in different forms, and for you it's just molding into who you are now. You actually said something earlier that was interesting around depression and the depression that you felt, which is interesting because I went through the same thing just before I ended my relationship. It felt like there was no coming out of it. It was so confusing, and I didn't want to hurt anyone, but I knew I had to hurt people to get what I wanted. I would feel sorry for anyone that's going through that and doesn't have the support, because it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, it is. And I think for me, it was not even just about hurting my partner at the time, but like I said, our lives were intertwined.
Yeah.
One of the biggest heartbreaks was breaking his mum's heart.
Yeah.
Breaking his best friend's heart. Breaking his brother's heart. You know, it wasn't, I felt like I was literally ruining everyone's life.
Yeah.
And I felt an incredible amount of pressure on my shoulders.
Absolutely.
And that there was no way that I could be myself and be happy in that, because it caused so much pain on other people. And I still to this day, I hate it. And it makes me feel sick when I think about the pain that it did cause on people. But at the end of the day, it was me being myself. I realised who I was as early as I possibly could have.
Yeah.
Given my life and the way things panned out. And I believe I went about everything the best way I could.
Yeah, it's an impossible situation. Someone's going to get hurt in it, and it's either going to be yourself or it's going to be other people.
Absolutely.
You got to weigh up.
Well, I think that's the thing, and you probably experienced it as well if you had that depressive sort of state before, but it literally got to a point where I wouldn't have survived. Mentally, I would not have survived, and I would not have continued living on this earth if I didn't take the path that I did.
I couldn't agree more. I think I actually remember taking videos. This is going to sound really weird, but we've probably all done it. But I remember taking videos of myself crying during that period, because I had never cried like that before. I was in so much pain from it because I wanted to look back on that once I was out of it. And obviously, as you know, there's many other reasons of what was going on at that time. But this particularly, I remember saying to my ex-husband at the time that being with you means I can't be me. And it took him a long time to realise that it had nothing to do with him.
No.
There was nothing wrong with in that way. It's just the fact that he was a man and I wanted to be with a woman. And it doesn't matter whether you go through those stages of am I bi, you know, maybe you could have an open situation. But at the end of the day, you're coming home to someone that isn't the someone that you need to come home to. And that was the hardest thing. And it's very depressive.
100%. And I think from both having gone through that, later in life, obviously, we both had a pretty good support network and things like that we could lean on. There's definitely people out there that wouldn't have that. And that's one thing I would say would be the best thing to do is to be honest and to make sure you have a person or a couple of people to lean on.
Yeah.
Because it won't be pretty. It won't be comfortable. No. It won't. No one's going to high five you.
No.
Especially if you're in the situation we were in, where
Absolutely.
you're with someone of the opposite sex. Then they're never going to turn around and be like,
high five.
That's absolutely fucking amazing. Like, I'm so excited for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
They might be if they're involved, but they're not gonna. They're not gonna.
No,
they're not be happy about it. And that's the reality. Like, we're not here to say, oh, go be your true self, this and that, it's the best. We're not. It's gonna be hard coming out.
The other thing you said was you leaned into the community, and that really resonated with me. And I think if you're someone going through this and you don't have support, or even if you do have support, get in touch with your local queer community, because
Absolutely.
The second I did that, everything changed for me.
Absolutely. But also, if that's too much, because I suffer from social anxiety, there's a huge online presence.
Absolutely.
Whether it be something like TikTok, which is where I've found a lot of my queer friends, there's plenty of others.
Absolutely. I was in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't until I got on TikTok that I really started to find out about other lesbians and queer people and speak to them and go on lives with people. I learned about G-Flip.
I taught you about that.
You did. And
You're welcome.
Thank you. And I didn't have that. I didn't have that growing up, and I didn't have that coming out. I had literally no one that was an ally to me in that moment, in that queer sense. And I think I would encourage anyone to reach out and try and find someone or find resources locally in that space, because it made a huge difference for me, and it sounded like it made a huge difference for you too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of things we can tell you and whatnot, and we're definitely not going to fit it all into one podcast episode. Unfortunately, there's a couple more categories to cover, but I think that's the biggest thing is we're going to try and give a little bit of advice on each episode and break down our queer experience and our queer perspective section by section. So I guess maybe on that note, you could tell everyone what's to come.
So it's really interesting that we were talking about TikTok, 'cause that's actually how we met. Stay tuned for the next episode, because we're going to be talking a little bit about that. Is TikTok the new Tinder? I don't know. But what we've talked about today, I think you'll find that we'll unpack that in many, many more episodes to come. So if you have any questions from today's episode, please reach out.
But further than that, in the podcast, there's plenty of other episodes, which I think people are going to be pretty interested in. We're going to go through us both having a bi stage and that representation.
I think there's one particular episode that's coming up that might be interesting. We're calling it the Bees and the Bees.
I think that's one that certain people can probably tune out of. Mum, don't listen to that episode.
Shazza, tune out. Although Shazza will probably love it, but we're going to say 18 plus for that episode.
We will warn at the start of the episode.
I look forward to that one, because we have some really good conversations around the Bees and the Bees. So
we certainly do. Perfect.
That's
actually perfect.
That's actually perfect. And get ready for us to be saying that quite a lot. That's actually perfect. That's
it's kind of our catchphrase.
It's our catchphrase. So
self-assigned.
Get used to it.
But we're excited.
I'm excited. On that note, thanks so much for listening to the first episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you come back to the next one.
Like, subscribe, follow.
Subscribe, follow, all that stuff. We appreciate you all.
Hey, love you, bye.
Love you, bye.